How many of you are like, I know that story? That's like, I know the story, the prodigal son. It's one of Jesus's more famous parables, which is why we got to pay extra close attention to it, because when you say, oh, I know that one, we tend to close off our ears. Like, you ever watch a movie and you're like, yeah, I've seen this before? And then you don't really pay attention to it. But then if you don't really pay attention to it, you can miss some of the things that are in the movie, even though you may have seen it before. So the familiarity can breed non-familiarity. And you can be like, oh, you know what? I missed a few things. And I did that. This is one of my favorite passages of Scripture, because there's so much good stuff here that we miss because we have an entirely different culture 2,000 years later. And there's so much good stuff here. So before we dive into it, I need to point out where we are on our church calendar. That's the whole year. And half the year we go through the story of Christ from his promised entry into the world at Advent all the way to him leaving and sending the Spirit to the church. There we are in Lent, heading towards Easter. We're getting there. Anyone here like a good trilogy? Anybody? A good trilogy? Well, there's lots of good trilogies out there, isn't there? There is, my favorite trilogy has to come first, because I have the computer screen, and I can do that. So here's my favorite trilogy ever, Lord of the Rings. It's one of those rare things where the book and the movies are like on equal levels. Just about. Books are a little bit better, because there's a lot more nuance in it that's really good. But the movies are a piece of art, you know. And you got to watch the extended versions. Any Lord of the Rings fans here? Everyone's hand should be up right now. What are you doing? We're going to repent today. Everybody's going to leave here a Lord of the Rings fan. No, we can move on. Because there's other trilogies out there. Does anyone recognize this one? From the 80s? Back to the Future. Are they doing a new one? I think they're like rebooting everything from the 80s at this point. So even if they're not, they probably will soon. And I hope they don't. Okay, then we got a trilogy of trilogies. Yes, this one's a little more contentious. Because you got the original one, the original series of Star Wars, episode 4, 5, and 6. You're like, these are perfect. You know, you can't get better than that. And then they added episode 1, 2, and 3, and my initial thought was, yeah, they're not that good. They're not very good. And then I just watched them a little bit more, and I'm like, oh, they're actually better. And then they have 7, 8, and 9, and I'm like, what were they thinking? What did they do to this series? It was good, and it's not anymore. There's lots of other trilogies out there, some to mention. Indiana Jones, really good one. Die Hard, only watched the first one. Godfather, I can't take violence, so I never watched any of them. Matrix, not bad. Pirates of the Caribbean, never saw them. And the Bourne series. These are all common trilogies. Why do we do trilogies? Anybody, like, why do we do trilogies? Why not make 4 movies? You ever seen just a movie that was 4? That's weird, isn't it? You'd be like, why did I make it a 4th one? That throws off. Like, something about 3 seems really complete. And there actually is something about 3 that's really complete. That this Hollywood writer actually said this. He said the first movie introduces our heroes. The second film develops the world and adds some depths, and the final film resolves the issues. Well, that's why we like trilogies so much. It takes a story, introduces us some good characters, develops a world, and then finishes up the entire story in the third film, and you're like, oh, that was good. We don't need to add anything to this. And this has been around for a long time, the threes. All the way back in the day, Cicero said this, it's the tricolon. He says, if you want to be a good speaker, make use of the tricolon. That's not something in your body that you have to get checked by the doctor. That actually means 3 sayings in Latin. And here's an example. I came, I saw, I conquered. That's a tricolon. There's 3 things there. Came and saw and conquered. Okay? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What? There's another tricolon. There it is. A priest, a pastor, and a rabbi walk into a bar. See, it's a tricolon. The best one of that is a priest, a pastor, and a rabbit walked into the bar, and the rabbit said, I think I am a typo. That's my favorite version of that one. So, here we have the tricolon. It's even a tricolon of tricolons. Did you notice that? I shared 3 examples of 3s. So there it is. There's something about 3s. Even in holy, theology, we have the Trinity, Father, Son, Spirit. There's something about 3 that just seems really complete. And in today's passage, we have 3 characters. We have the youngest, we have the eldest, and we have the father. And this is actually part of a 3 parable that Jesus tells in response. We just skipped the first 2 because it's a rather long passage. But someone loses a coin, someone loses a sheep, and then someone loses a son. And so there's like this elevating in value that happens that we have to kind of take note of. But then in this passage there is this tricolon effect of the youngest, the eldest, and the father. So that's why we love good trilogy. For some reason, our brain just likes it. So if you listen closely, like this story is actually not about what you think it's about. It's really interesting. We think it's about, oh, this is how people get right with God. You're off, you're doing your own thing, and it's bad, and then you end up in the weeds somewhere, and then you return to God, and God welcomes you. That's not the point of this story. Did you know that? It's in the story, but it's not the point of the story, because it doesn't resolve there. Something else happens on the back end, and Jesus is talking to certain groups of people. And so while he uses that story to illustrate something, it's an illustration of a point, not how do we get right with God. Oh, we got to return to God and get right with God, and God welcomes us back in. All of that can be true, but it's not the point of the story. The point of this story is something else. And this is not about how outsiders become insiders. This is not a story about that. Not a story about how irreligious people can become religious, or how unsaved people can become saved people, or how people who are not right with God can become right with God. This is not a story about that. So if you notice, Jesus is talking to a certain group of people who are complaining. He's like, why are you hanging out with those people, Jesus? Don't you know they're like bad people. They're dirty. They're filthy. You don't want to hang out with them. We know who they are, and we know that you shouldn't be hanging out with those people because we have created a nice little class system over here that's great. And Jesus tells this story to them to address that attitude. So it's not about how outsiders become insiders so that we can, rejoice when an outsider becomes an insider, but it's a lesson to those who believe themselves as insiders to check their attitude about outsiders. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Did you follow that? Jesus isn't talking to the outsiders. He's talking to the people who are in charge of the whole thing, the Pharisees, right? And he's addressing, why do you keep hanging out with these people who are like tax collectors and sinners and all these horrible people, Jesus? He's like, well, let me tell you a story. What's going on here? This story is to them in relation to that question. So it's not a story about, if we end the story there, we missed the major point of the story, because it's a challenge for repentance from those who believe they're on the inside, who have social privilege inside, who are powerful, who are prideful, who are self-righteous and religiously blind, to then check their attitude about how they are with their thing that they call religion in the present moment. It's actually not to those people out there, it's to us in here. This is the really, really interesting thing about this passage. Because growing up, reading this passage is like, let me tell you a story, and this is what God is like, and here's how you can get right with God. They left off the ending. No one ever told me the ending. And then I read the rest of the story, and I'm like, that's really confusing. Jesus doesn't even resolve the story. Where are we going to go with this? So it's really, really interesting. So to dive into the story's intricate details of culture and history, you've got to allow me to nerd out, but with some jokes that ease the tension. I do that sometimes. So we're going to talk about the sons. They're kind of the star of the story, right? It's about these 2 sons. It says a man has 2 sons. We immediately think in our brain, it's like the American family, right? We got 2.5 kids. Can you see the joke in that slide? I had to wait a minute because some didn't get it. There's only half a kid in this one. Okay, so the average American family is got 2.5 kids. It's got a dog, a picket white fence, and a house. And they live in their little social bubble that they call a family. They have an extended family that they can go and visit. That's how we work as a society. Not how they work at all. We have this thing where we're trying to raise our kids, and then we send them to college, and then we hope that they find jobs, and then they can get houses of their own, and then they can invite us over to have fun with their kids in the grandparent mode, and then be like, yay, I can just love and leave and see you later, right? I'm not there yet. I'm not that old yet. Some of you are there. Some of it is like grand dogs. You like to go and visit grand dogs or whatever. But That's not how it works. That is not how they work. They don't raise up their kids and send them off into the world. We're going to grow their wings and they can fly and then they can get a job and grow up and be successful. That's not how their family system worked. Our family systems are independent units with extended families that we go off to visit. And then we send our kids off to be extended family, and then they, create their own independent units, and we send them off, we send them off, we send them off. That's not how it works with them. Let me show you a picture. First century insulas are different. You ever been camping with all your family? Imagine living that way. All right? They have all of these houses here are somebody's house. So when you're the patriarchal father figure in a family, that means that you are in charge of the family's business. The family is not just a social unit, it is a business within a town. And you are going to have some kind of a trade that you deal in. Maybe you're the shepherd of the family. Maybe you are a weaver and you weave cloths, or maybe you're a fisher. You're going to have some sort of a trade that you have, that you're in charge of, that you grow, and then the other people in the town have trades that they're in charge of, and they grow their families, and it's a big family business. And so when your son grows up, you don't send him off to go start a family and then start a business and be independent. He marries someone, they bring them into the father's house, and they build a room on the father's house, and then you live on the father's premises. So in my father's house there are many rooms. I go to prepare a place for you. All that language is reflective of this insular family system. And so you don't grow up and go off and go on your own. That's weird if you do that. You grow up, you bring someone into the family, and then you extend the family's house. And over generations of this happening, you have a large insula. It's called an insula. And there's a courtyard that everyone kind of hangs out in. And then there's a whole bunch of houses around the edges and stuff. So that's how it works in the previous day. So this here, family system, is very different than ours, isn't it? This is this family system of how it works. Now, when you grow up as a son in here, your dad is in charge until he dies. He's the big head honcho of the entire family business until he dies, and then the oldest son inherits most of the father's wealth and becomes the patriarchal figure of the family. What happens if you're not the firstborn? You get a little bit of the cut, but not much. So here's how it breaks down in this story. The firstborn gets a double portion, is what it's called. So you divide everything between the sons, and then you give double to the first eldest. So he gets 2/3 of the inheritance, and the youngest son gets 1/3 of the whole family estate. That happens when the father dies. Now the youngest son going up to the father and saying, I want my share of the inheritance now, is about as insulting as you can get, because you're pretty much saying, I wish you were dead, because I want the inheritance before you die, and I don't really care about you, I just care about what I'm getting. Now, what kind of inheritance are we talking about? Like he's going to go down to the bank and cash out his 401k and hand out? No. It's in a cash society. This is an agricultural society. So if he's a farmer, 1/3 of the estate is going to be land. It's going to be goats or cattle. There is a fatted calf in the story, so we know that there's some kind of a farming. So he has to, if he wants to get anything out of the family estate, he's got to liquefy the estate and turn it into cash so that he can go travel. What does this do to the house that the father has built over generations and generations and generations? He's now reduced the influence of the father's home and business in the whole community by 1/3. This is a big deal in a honor-shame society, and a big deal when the whole town is going to be talking about what that son did. Can you believe that the father actually let the son do that? So there are other stories similar to this one in their culture, but when this happens in the story, the father takes that son and then invites the whole town out, and they kill him. They just stone him to death right in the town square and say that was disrespectful. That's the kind of society it was. It was kind of crazy like that. But Jesus turns a twist on the story and says the father gave him the inheritance. That was absolutely unexpected because the people would have been familiar with a story like this in which the son gets the tar beat out of him and he ends up dead. They're like, oh yeah, we've heard this one. He's like, and then he gave them the inheritance. They're like, what? What just happened? Why would he do that? Does he know that's going to like ruin the household? It's going to reduce the family wealth by 1/3? And he's going to go off and go to a foreign land in a place where you are tied to land and people and family. To go off to a foreign land is about the worst thing you can do. And so what we can get from this so far is that the youngest did it all wrong. Every single thing he could do wrong, he did wrong. And the eldest did it all right. The youngest did it all wrong. The eldest did it all right. So he goes off. He ends up like feeding pigs. Now, if you're a Jewish person, you're not allowed to eat bacon, right? The reason for that is because they're unclean. You're not allowed to touch them. But he is now feeding pigs. So he's now on the lowest. He's an indentured slave. He has like sold himself into slavery to pay for his bills, and he's feeding pigs. But now a famine's hit the land, and he has nothing left, and he's looking at like the pig feed that he's given him. He's like, I could eat that. Like that, I could do that. I could just eat that stuff. So he's about as low as you can get for this culture. He's around unclean people with unclean animals doing an unclean task as a slave. You can't get lower than this. Like death would be better, actually, in this culture. To just die and be out of the picture would be better in this culture than where he's currently at. And so he is at the utter bottom of the pit, and the famine hits, and now they can't even afford to feed him. And so he's like, and these pigs are probably being raised to sacrifice to the god Dionysius because there was a whole pig slaughter that happened for them. So there's all of these intersections of like everyone hearing this story is like, is it gonna get worse? Like, oh my God, it got worse again. I can't believe it got worse. And it got worse, and it got worse. Now he's at the very bottom. He's like, you know what? I think I better go home. And their minds are going to be like, oh, he's going to get the tar beat out of him. Like, he's just going to get whooped. It's not going to be good. So he says, I'm going to go home. Because I know, in order to not have my father kill me, I'll sell myself as a slave to him. Because it'd be better to be a slave in my father's house than to be here doing this. And so he's thinking in his mind, how am I going to convince my dad to not kill me when I get home? Because everything he's done so far, this culture would have put him to death and stoned him. And he's like, how do I dodge that if I get home? So even his intentions are not the greatest. He's like, I got to figure out how to like stay alive and eat. I guess I can go back home because it'd be better to be a slave there than to die here. And so he takes off for home. And he returns and he's reconciled as a son and an heir. His father's like, here's a robe, here's a ring, here's some sandals. Because if you're barefoot, you're a slave. He's like, nope, you're not a slave. Here's sandals for your feet. He puts the best robe on him, which would have been the father's own robe, puts his own robe on him, and then gives him a ring. And the ring is very significant because that's how you do business. You would have a stamp on your ring, and if you want to sign a business deal in the father's name, his stamp would be on the ring, and you would imprint that upon wax and say, yeah, I speak for my dad. I'm doing business in the name of my dad. I can do that. He's given me permission to do that with this ring. And he would stamp it, and it was like rubber stamping something and saying, approved by the father, kind of a thing. That's how it worked. So not only is he not just a slave, now he's reinstated as a son, but now we have a sticky thing. A son gets an inheritance. He already sold his inheritance. It's gone. He's reduced the entire family estate by 1/3, the land, the animals, everything. He's liquidated it. It now belongs to other people in the city. Whose pocket is that going to come out of? He only has 2 sons, so the answer is one person. And the one person is the older son. The older son is going to have to give up his double portion to give the youngest son a single portion. And they're both going to then get the same portion of the father's inheritance that the youngest son already blew 1/3 of it on. And so he's like, so the father didn't even think of that. He's just like, hey, come home, we're going to have a party, it's going to be great. And he puts him in like the house. He's established as a figure in the house, no longer a slave, and he's brought in, and he can do business again, and he gets an inheritance, and he forgot to tell the older son about it. And the older son starts coming home, and he's like, what's that music? Like, there's some music happening here. Like, I keep track of the books, so I didn't order I didn't order a band. I didn't order a party. How are we going to financially afford this? I got the Excel spreadsheet in front of me, and I know that I'm trying to work and build this estate back up to what it was, and it's not working, and it's really hard, and now there's music, and who's partying at a time like this? And so he shows up, and he's like, oh yeah, your brother came back. It's like, really? Yeah, and we made him a son again. I gave him back his ring and put some sandals on his feet. It's going to be great. We killed the fatted calf. We're partying. He's like, wait a second. You made him a son again? That means he gets my second portion, and now I just get one portion, and he gets one portion? I'm not cool with this. So you can see the tensions rising here in this moment. He's just like freaking out. Now, I love how the story ends. The story ends, like, the dad comes out in the driveway, and he's talking to his son. He's like, hey man, everything I've had has always been yours. You know that. But we needed to celebrate because his son was lost and now he's found. He was dead and now he's alive. Like, we needed to celebrate, right? Credits roll. So the reason this is unresolved is because it's to a specific audience of very uber religious people that don't want those people coming in and messing up their thing. And so the answer is not given because it is like putting the ball in the court of the uber-religious Pharisees saying, what are you going to do? I'm welcoming back all of these people back into the folds as kind of your job was supposed to do that. And I'm doing your job for you. I'm welcoming that back in. It's going to come at a cost to you, though. It's going to cost you something. Are you okay with that? That's what Jesus' question is with this, and it leaves it unresolved. And we know the answer is going to be no, because they're going to kill him later for doing and saying the things that he does. So let's look at fathers. That was the son's story. Let's look at fathers. Like, fathers in this day and age are very respectable figures. They're very, like, you've got to say and do and maintain dignity and save face, and it's very much like there's an honor-shame system here that is a currency amongst people. And if the honor-shame system is broken, somebody's got to pay for that. And this youngest son broke the honor-shame system in the family structure and brought shame upon the house of the father. And so everyone is just assuming that the father is going to have the son killed in order to reestablish or get rid of the shame that has been put on his family. And they're like, oh, we're just going to get rid of him, and then you'll be in good standing again, and it'll just be a tragedy that you had to endure. And instead, we see this father, like, standing on the front porch. He sees the son come up over the hill, and then he takes off running. Have you ever tried to run in a bathrobe? It's kind of hard, isn't it? Like, these guys, their garb goes all the way to the ground. They're very distinguished. They're like kings. They wear like big, heavy clothes, and you can't even see their feet. It's like they're just like hovering and like floating and stuff. And so in order for the father to run, he's going to have to hike them up. And there's something that the Bible calls girding your loins. It's a fun phrase, which means that you take your tunic that's hanging and you basically wear it like a diaper. Remember those old cloth diapers? You got to like wrap it around and then wrap it through and then bring it up and then fold it down, and now you're like good to go. You can run, except now you got your calves and your thighs out and you're like, people are whistling and everything, right? Like, so he like girds the loins and he takes off running. And in a town that's small, everyone's going to be able to see like, what in the world is going on? Why did he like hike up his stuff and start running down the road? Like, he could have sent some of his servants to do that for him. He could have sent, like, there's many people that work in his house. I'm sure he could have sent someone off to go and do what he's got to do. But for some reason, this guy thinks there's something really important on the hill, and he's got to run out to him. And so he girds up in his loins and he takes off and runs out to meet his son. And his son is like, oh crap, here he comes. He's like running. He's gonna like gonna do one of those like flying uppercuts, and I'm gone. He's mad at me now. He runs and he like falls on him and kisses his neck, and he's like, oh, my son is back. This is wonderful. I can't believe he's back. And he starts sobbing, and his son's like, wait, what was the speech I had? Oh, yeah, right, I got this speech I'm supposed to do. Like, okay, I've sinned against heaven, I've sinned against you, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son, if you could take me back. And then the father's just like, not even paying attention. And he's like, hey, we need some robes over here. We need some sandals, and we need the ring. My son's back. Let's bring him home. This is very different. Because when his father figure is not like loving dad that we think of when we think of a good dad in our society. He's more like a distinguished businessman that is supposed to be distant and away and aloof and hard to get to emotionally. This outbreak in this culture would just be absolutely not heard of at all. Because the kind of power structures they know is the one named Caesar. And they actually had a name for Caesar. He was like the ruler of the world. They called him this, the supreme father of the empire. That's not from Star Wars. That was actually there. And then they had Herod, who was kind of a puppet king. But they knew, like, these kind of authority figures are different. Like, these kind of authority figures, like, you cross them, you're dead, kind of a thing. And so Jesus introduces a father figure, not as a perfect representation of God, by the way. Parables don't do perfect representations of God. But there's something of God that is being communicated in this parable. And so he's trying to show us something about the power structures and the social structures that we hold. Here's a fun quote I wrote. So when we have a household with an authority father figure and a rebellious son who embarrasses the family name, disowns the family land, and reduces the family inheritance by a third, we expect a reaction from the father that reflects the power establishments of the day. What would Caesar do if this happened? You're dead. Sorry, you're gone. Not only are you fired, not only you don't even get to go to prison, you're dead, you failed, we're gone, right? First and foremost, this is not a story of how we can be redeemed to God, but a gut check for those in power to ask, how do we wield that power? How do we consider an insider of the households? Who do we consider an insider of the households we manage? Who do we consider an outsider? And how do we differentiate? There's power structures at play here that Jesus is trying to call into question. Because these Pharisees have left a whole bunch of people on the outside, have not bothered to help them and get to them. And he's saying that you have the power to reach out to these people and help them, and you're not doing it. So the oldest son in the story is representative of the Pharisees. But if a younger son were to just hightail it off and run away, it would be the responsibility of the oldest son to go and find the younger son and bring him back. That would be his job. He didn't do that. And so the father has assumed that his son is dead. When he sees him coming up over the hill, he's like, oh my gosh, he's not dead, he's here. And the older son's job was to go and search. And Jesus is saying, since y'all aren't doing it, I'm going to go do it. This was your job. You failed to do it. Instead, you set up a power structure that kept you at the top and these people away from actually getting in contact with God through the temple structure that you have built and the worship rules that you have established. You have limited who can come and how they can come and how hard it is to get there. And instead of going and inviting them in, you left them outside. And now I'm going and doing your job for you. And that's why they're so mad. They're so mad because it's a direct challenge on their whole system. And so these fathers, the father of this story is very different than the fathers that they would know. It would be very different than the fathers that they would understand in power structures, like the great father of the empire, Caesar. And so Jesus is telling the insiders, hey, you're not as inside as you think you are. Because the son was like, hey, I've done everything right, and I've given everything to you, and I've slaved, and you never once celebrated for me. He's like, well, you had everything. You could be celebrating and inviting people here. Now, the fatted calf party, that sounds fun. The fatted calf party. We should have one of those at Easter, the fatted calf party. That's going to be fun. I'm not slaughtering the calf, though. So the fatted calf party, they don't have refrigerators, right? You got a refrigerator. If you kill a deer in hunting season, you put it in the freezer, right? What happens if you leave it outside? Oh, it's going to be bad, right? So, can 6 people eat an entire fatted calf? What are you going to do with all the leftovers, right? There wouldn't be leftovers because you would make a sacrifice of an animal large enough for the crowd that you have invited. So who did he invite? The entire town. because the whole town is involved in this story. They're not really mentioned by name, but the resemblance of this calf means that there needs to be a large amount of people that are gathered. In an honor-shame society, when the sun goes off, the whole town is looking at this household saying, wow, what is in that father's head? Like, he is messed up. There's something wrong with that guy. He should have killed him before he left the property and sold everything off. And like, the whole town is going to be talking of this moment. So when you invite the son back in, and now this son has to do business with the whole town, there needs to be a reconciliation process of the whole town. So he invites the entire town. He's like, I don't care about this honor-shame system. My son's back, and I'm rejoicing, and you're going to be here, and we're going to welcome him, and it's going to be a big party. So everyone is now like, I guess we're welcoming him back. Okay, we're going to welcome him back. It's going to be good. He can do business in the Father's name again, and I guess that's good. And the older son is the one who's like, wait a second. No. We can't have this. You know how much money this is going to cost? It's going to cost me a lot of money, and I don't like this. That's the attitude of the Pharisees right there. I don't want to be open to that person coming in here because that's going to cost me something of how I've set it up to be that favors me. And that is the parable of the prodigal son. It's not about the son returning and everyone rejoicing and saying that was a nice, warm, bubbly story. It is a direct challenge to the people who are the religious elite of the society and saying, why are you not focusing on the people that need help? They need our help. We have the power to give it. Let's do it. That's Jesus' message in this whole prodigal son story. So, a couple of reflection questions for you to think about this week. And they're good ones. Who do I grumble about when they are included? Okay, let's think about that. It might take some self-reflection. It could be not just a church setting, but who do you grumble about when they're invited to the family dinner? Ooh. Who do you grumble about when you have to look at them at the work cooler? Like, I gotta go have a conversation with someone. Oh man. Who do you grumble about when they are included? But not just is it outward. Is it me? Are you like the son who's walking back? He's like, oh man, I messed this up and God's gonna totally trash me. Are you grumbling about how God has already included you? I know I could do that. We can do it towards others, but it's oftentimes a projection of how we're doing it with ourselves and God first. And so if we get that one in check, we do it less with these people out here. Because we're not trying to project something that we feel that was too hot to handle. We're not throwing it out there and then saying, oh, look, it's over there. You hold it and you're like, oh, wait. Do I not feel welcomed by God? And that's why I'm not feeling welcoming of those people and those types of people and the people who think and did all this other different than me. This is the hard part about loving our enemies, is we have to love ourselves first. Because if we don't love ourselves, we project that junk outward and hate it out there. And so this story of the prodigal son has a little secret side door that says, self-reflective moment, how are you in your attitude towards God? Not your standing. Jesus has already fixed all that good stuff. Are you okay with it? Or do you have to try and figure out how to earn it and how to save yourself and how to be worthy of something that you'll never be worthy of grace and love and mercy that's perfect? It's not the point. It's just given to you as a gift. You're welcomed in. Got to be okay with it. Are you okay with it? If you're not okay with it, you're going to be projecting that stuff outwards and throwing shade on everything out there. So, is it me that who I'm grumbling? And a spiritual practice, give this a shot this week. Don't try to bargain with God this week. Oh, that's a hard one, isn't it? Okay, God, like if you do this, then I promise, I'll do this, and this. Like, that's just not how God works. God's not holding out on you until you fix something. That's just not how it works. That's not how prayer works. That's not how God meets you in moments. Like, God is with you in every single moment, working with all the raw material that you are and you have, doing the next possible thing that you're capable of. That's just it. And if you become more capable of more things, then life travels that direction. Doesn't mean it's not hard, but it means that you're capable of more. So don't try to bargain with God this week. Last one is look for what God is doing and then join in. Don't ask God to bless what you're doing. Ask God what's being blessed right now and what's my responsibility to it. And then jump in. That is the message of the prodigal son. We have a poem not by Malcolm Guite this week. I know there's going to be an audible gasp. But Jan Richardson, one of my other favorite poems, she's written some stuff for Lent, and this one is called Blessed Are You Who Bear the Light. So let's, benediction moment. Blessed are you who bear the light in unbearable times, who testify to its endurance amid the unendurable, who bear witness to its presence when everything seems in shadow and grief. Blessed are you in whom the light lives, in whom the brightness blazes, your heart a chapel, an altar, where in the deepest night can be seen the fire that shines forth in you, in unaccountable faith, in stubborn hope, in love that illuminates every broken thing it finds. And that was Blessed Are You Who Bear the Light by Jan Richardson. Amen.